Okay, welcome to our next podcast, the Sci Campus to Cyber, already the 24th episode. In our podcast, we constantly try to address social topics that might go a bit beyond what we do at the university. And today I am very, very happy to have a great guest, Hendrik Schipphorst, where we will, of course, talk about digitalization in general, but also, and it is well known that I am personally a big soccer fan about the topic that moves everyone. And I am very grateful that Mr. Schipphorst found time today. Actually, not quite at the end of the World Cup, which has just captivated us all, but perhaps that can serve quite well as a hook to address one or two topics. So welcome, Mr. Shiphost, and I tend to, before I praise you highly for everything you have done and everything you are moving, perhaps you could give a very brief introduction. What do you do? What is your background? And why are you so closely connected to football?
I gladly do that. I gladly do that. Thank you for the invitation, Professor Friedrichsen. So, my name is Hendrik Schipphorst. I am 52 years old. I am married, live in Hamburg, have two children, two girls, and have been with Sport 5 since 1998. I started my Sport 5 career at the first FC Nuremberg. I worked for 10 years of this long time with our marketing teams in Nuremberg and at HSV, and have been, now for 18 years in the Hamburg headquarters, where we manage all our business, both nationally and internationally, and have been the managing director of this wonderful company for 6 years now. And maybe because it's quite an interesting side fact, even though it's not a family business, my father was the first managing director of what was then UFA's Film and Television GmbH. That's why for me, it's always been more than just an employer, because it also has an emotional component.
Yes, there's a nice story about your father. He used to be a lecturer at the FU, and my wife always likes to tell the story that she took a seminar with him and is still deeply impressed today. I have also told you this personally once. It's just a side note, but that's how the relationship with the university was, and maybe we can plan or approach that with you sometime. I would, of course, be very pleased. Now, as you know, we are a university that is very focused on digital matters. We are even completely digital, and you just said you've been in the business for a long time. When would you say you first noticed that digitalization also plays a role in your company? So when were you first confronted with it, where you say, Onzo, wow, something is happening if you look at it historically?
Yes, exactly. So perhaps quite interesting. When I started in 98, we didn't have emails yet. We didn't have company cell phones. We had a landline phone. We did sales with the Yellow Pages, and contracts were sent back and forth by fax. Younger people can hardly imagine that. Therefore, honestly, the first significant experience was the introduction of a company email. And when you look at the marketing side now, then at some point it was the commercial website that club set up, and with which you then had another. So besides the stadium-born and club-born rights, you suddenly had a digital reach that could also be used in the sale of advertising rights. I believe that was the first case where it became commercially interesting for us.
Do you currently feel the pressure in your company? I mean, your business area, if you will, football is considered rather traditional, and you just mentioned that. I still remember stories where faxes would arrive 2 minutes before the end of the transfer period.
Or maybe not.
Do you notice that now, especially the topic of AI plays a role, or how do you feel that in your everyday life?
Yes. So generally, I think it's fair to say that the sports industry is always a bit behind the free market, like in terms of digitalization, internationalization. But now, of course, AI is also arriving a bit later. We at Sport5 are already in the middle of it. We have, for example, rolled out Copilot for all colleagues because we work in a Microsoft environment. I personally use it daily. I am certainly not a digital native. I wouldn't claim that for myself, but this is not a trend topic. Rather, it will significantly accompany the economy and thus also sports. And that's why we are right in the middle of it. Now, a practical example is that we have, let's say, virtual sales assistants in use. And another thing is, of course, that especially with all the topics of creative services, we are already making use of artificial intelligence for image editing, but also for developing sales pitches.
That means, of course, you also understand that the markets have changed, as has the attention. Young people today have completely different opportunities than we might remember from our youth. Where would you say, at the moment, when looking at marketing, which is your specialty, what are the most important development trends you recognize, and how is that ultimately considered in your marketing? It's a battle for attention in the end, right? So for attention.
Exactly. So I think I always try to see it positively, which sometimes becomes a bit harder for me as I get older.
But from my perspective, because we have social media, a completely different content area has grown in the past, basically, especially in football. We worked for a week or mostly 14 days for a home game. Then the home game was there. That was the peak in terms of reach and all topics, and then it tapered off again. Meanwhile, there is a constant buzz, and that's why we have, of course, also gotten involved in selling our advertising rights. To give a concrete example, we now sell the so-called training wear separately for many clubs because there are an incredible number of pictures of training sessions of the clubs on social media. And there, for example, a marketing potential has emerged through social media that did not exist 15 or 10 years ago. And so we always have to make sure that we adjust our range of offerings accordingly.
Now we have this in Germany specifically, keyword traditional clubs. We've seen it again now. Schalke 04 emerged in a boom. Thousands of people at the training. You yourself have experience with Nuremberg and HSV. Now a traditional club faces a new challenge, the big global brand. How do you deal with that? So what is the step there? It is quite a gap from the classic tradition that we still maintain a lot in Germany. In England, it might be done similarly, but how do you reach that global level?
Yes, I think, well, it's important first to, let's say, try to understand the club. We are also allowed to market Schalke 04, and let's say one club is more open to certain development topics, the other not so much. In the end, we are, I would say, commercial service providers and can only show the club what topics and developments exist in the market. And in the end, the club decides whether to pursue them or not for whatever reason. That might be because he is perhaps worried that it won't be received by his members or fans as it is by others, because the topic of commercialization is sometimes demonized. But it can also be that there are other motives. So my task as a marketing partner of, I would say, very, very many clubs in the first, second, and third leagues is, but also in handball, by the way, not just in football, is to show the club's potentials where they can grow. And they find these primarily in the commercial area. But in the end, each club decides for itself. And of course, we have to. There's no template that I can just apply to HSV or Schalke or FC Augsburg, but we can show what best cases exist, what market developments there are, and then in the end, the club has to decide what they want to go along with and what not.
Now you just mentioned the investor topic, which I will get to in a moment. If I remember correctly, you are also the largest marketer in women's football with Sport5, and there is quite a lot happening there, especially when you look at the Bundesliga. It is almost a comparison to the Bundesliga in men's football. How do you see the development there? That is in itself its own ecosystem, or how should one understand that? Because it is really interesting how now such an accelerator system is emerging. How do you see that? How do you assess that?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that the Women's Football Bundesliga has tremendous growth potential because the demand is there on the consumer side, meaning fans, and equally on the corporate side, where there is increasing demand, sometimes specifically for engagements only in women's football and not in men's football. And we have to take that into account. However, I believe that maybe something can still be done with the format in women's football. So, to my knowledge, there is currently a discussion about whether there should be playoffs and not the classic league operation like in the men's Bundesliga. And I think that could be a good way to position the women's Bundesliga differently. I believe what we especially need is a broader reach regarding the Bundesliga games because the viewer ratings are partly okay. In terms of growth, they are even outstanding, but they are also starting from a very low level. And I think we need to see how we can bring the Bundesliga to a wider audience so that we can achieve even more reach.
We have quite a few examples in women's football where it's about investors, and that naturally brings us to the classic question, which I must ask you. How do you view and experience the current German investor debate? Maybe also a bit in comparison to what we see in the Premier League, as you are also active as a marketer in the Premier League. How do you assess the current situation, and what do you think the development boost will be?
Yes, well, first of all, I find the discussions in Germany somewhat, I'll say it as I feel it, somewhat hypocritical because I think there are certain circumvention situations, I'll call them, where there are already investors in German clubs. I think it's fine if one continues to understand this 50+1 topic as a guideline, but in the end, the question is always what is done with the money, and let's say into which management structures does it fall, and what do they know to do with the respective investment. I believe it would be negligent to completely distance oneself from the topic of investors in German football because I think it's an opportunity, especially in international competition with other leagues. The Premier League is one, but it applies equally to Spain or Italy. It's important that we remain competitive. And yet you can set up governance structures where the club still ultimately has the say with its registered association structure. I believe that does not exclude each other. I found the discussions we had in the league, which ultimately led to many tennis balls being thrown onto football fields. I think from my perspective, it's more of a missed opportunity. But I understand that this is not a particularly popular opinion that I hold. But I do not believe that, therefore, the decline of German football is not investors, in my view.
Yes, we will address this whole complex topic of commercialization in another context. I come from a time when it started with jersey advertising. You probably remember Eintracht Braunschweig and Mr. Mast and how jersey advertising was first introduced into sponsorship. Now, of course, it's a different time today, and I would be interested to know what this ecosystem actually looks like today, purely from a practical perspective. When you sell a sponsorship package today, how should one imagine that? And you also see what is currently developing in the media sector, in the technical sector. Where will that develop in the next few years? But maybe just briefly to get an insight, what does a sponsorship package look like today? Because it's probably no longer the classic jersey advertising, I suppose.
Exactly. So we do sell them too, but the package has also changed substantially. So let's put it this way. When I started back in 1998 at 1 FC Nuremberg, there were, let's say, 3 packages, gold, silver, bronze. And if they didn't want those, well, they were out of luck. That doesn't work today. Today, the customer benefit is much more in focus. I believe we at Sport5, I would say, have particularly understood this. Today we have many sales colleagues, and we used to have many sales colleagues, but what we now bring to the table in so-called pre-sales and have to bring to convince companies to invest money in sponsorship is incredible. So much intelligence has been built up. We have our own department with over 60 people who deal with BI and creatives, so that we build the sales pitch in a way that ultimately reflects the customer's needs. because there are many discussions with companies that don't start with I have jersey A, B, or C, or the advertising board here, but rather begin by first understanding what the communicative needs of the companies are. And then in the second step, we come up with possible solutions for these communicative challenges. And from my perspective, this has turned 180 degrees compared to before, where there were many emotional decision makers and now they are fact-based decision makers. In the best case, there is still someone involved who once slept in bed linens from Mönchengladbach or Dortmund. That doesn't hurt either, but these are all business leaders who couldn't afford to make decisions based on their own emotional backgrounds. And that's why I think this is the most important transformation we've made, and it will continue. And I believe the shift will also move a bit more from reach, because ARD Sportschau or Sports Studio or Sky to engagement developing, that you manage to let's say get the consumers to collaborate with a company. I believe that's the future where it will continue to go.
And that actually brings us to a very interesting topic, hospitality and the premium segment. And that's quite interesting, especially when you see how you market it very professionally in some clubs. So what significance does this premium segment have kind of in the direction you just explained, strategically also for the marketing in your area?
Yes, so I think there is... Well, basically, hospitality marketing is now part of every sports event that has a professional touch. And then there are, I would say, outstanding events. I'll mention the Football World Cup or also Formula One hospitality, where you have an incredibly high price point. In contrast, if I go back to Bundesliga football, the price is still relatively manageable. I believe fundamentally it's like this. We need atmosphere in the stadium, so it doesn't help us to design a football stadium where 60,000 business seats are to be sold. And still a certain ratio must be included, because this match day experience continues to be one of the unique selling points of sponsorship sales. And you naturally get that through hospitality, whether it be boxes or business seats, which we consciously always try to further develop. Because one thing you have to see, the CEO of company A, B, or C can always go out for a good meal. He doesn't need a football game for that. We have to offer a certain level there, of course, but the question is, what is the surrounding experience? And we are thus talking about the match day experience. It actually starts a week before. How does communication with the people take place? They are then, what happens in the stadium? They are prepared for it. These might also be informative, useful pieces of information. Then also afterward, which guests they might have had with them. Then maybe there's a scarf in the box or on the table where you try to create an emotional connection. So that is now 100% part of this product.
And now in Hamburg, you have a nice example with two clubs, St. Pauli and HSV. St. Pauli consciously takes this path, always putting tradition in the foreground, like in fan culture. Although we both know you are also subject to commercialization, you are very involved with HSV. We can take that as an example. You also have Schalke. How do you manage this balancing act between tradition and commerce? You know that these the big clubs like Bayern Munich and Dortmund constantly have this problem with the fans saying, no, we don't want that sponsor. That's always a balancing act for you, right? Because you have to say, well, on one hand, we have to fill and sell the sponsorship. Well, where is the point for you? Or how do you even manage to connect that?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, as Sport5, we have some values that logically also play a role in acquisition, but in the end, we are brokers. That means we offer clubs sponsorship deals. We thoroughly check companies to see if they are solvent, if there is anything that violates laws. These are all issues that are logically excluded for us. But take the Rheinmetall deal with BVB. We were allowed to broker that. I am incredibly proud of it. If I had said 5 years ago that Rheinmetall would become a sponsor of BVB, no, maybe not. By now, Rheinmetall is, in my view, a company that the whole world envies us for. They also have communicative needs, in this case, possibly a shortage of skilled workers, which we can address with sponsorship solutions. And in the end, the club, in this case, Borussia Dortmund, has to decide whether to take this communicative risk. They did it. I think Carsten Kramer does an excellent job representing it externally. But of course, there are also clubs that say that is the red line we do not want to cross. In case of doubt, I cannot understand it, but it is not my decision. And if now, hypothetically, St. Pauli would say, we do not work with Rheinmetall, then it is their right, in case of doubt, not to do so. And we are only there as brokers, in quotation marks, to point out this possibility. And one more quick sentence, because I can't resist saying it now, because the friends from FC St. Pauli are, of course, also commercially driven. Also, HSV also rightly claims to be a traditional club. St. Pauli is too. Maybe they have a slightly different tradition in one direction or another. In the end, everyone at St. Pauli also knows that it doesn't work without the television money and the sponsorship and hospitality revenues if you want to be involved in professional football.
Yes, I think that's also something that naturally has to do with the overall structure of the DFL and so on. I think the moment you accept to be part of this mix, you have to accept it. Otherwise, it doesn't work at all. You can't avoid that. I also bring up the World Cup. I don't want to talk about you with FIFA and so on, because that's not our topic. I'm more interested in the fact that we have now experienced for the first time with 48 teams. This was massively criticized beforehand. So quite openly, how did you perceive it? It also has a bit to do with sponsorship and marketing, but in general, how do you evaluate it?
Yes, well, I was at the World Cup, however, in Canada at the game Germany, Ivory Coast in Toronto. I was able to experience the football enthusiasm in the city, and colleagues of mine were in the USA and they reported the same to me. I must first acknowledge that it's a great event that I would say once again mobilized the masses, and there aren't many global events that manage to do that across the entire planet. Now one can, and I was, in quotes, a victim myself of the high ticket prices also in the public sector complain, and yet one must acknowledge that the stadiums were all sold out. I believe we probably wouldn't want to or be able to achieve such a high price point at a World Cup in Germany. But this additional round didn't bother me. From my perspective, despite all the criticism of FIFA, I can't see that it was a complete mistake to expand the tournament further. Whether it needs to be expanded even further might need to be discussed, but in the end, as you rightly said, I can't decide that. I think even this break for drinking, well, if anyone can introduce it, then certainly FIFA, but do I think it will come to the Bundesliga? No, I don't think so. And still, from a commercial perspective, it's of course another smarter move to perhaps include one or another advertising break. Of course, it bothers many people in Germany. I think many people around the world say whether there's an extra 2-minute break for drinking where 2 commercials are shown or not. But even there, I probably don't hold an overly popular viewpoint.
Yes, okay, then the question would be, I assume you are aware of everything you experienced there and come back and ask. And the question for me would naturally be, if you came back and I worked with you at Sport5 and said, what can we use from that for marketing? And you market European clubs. Can we take anything from that? Is there anything where you would say, I learned something that we can also incorporate into our marketing, even if you shouldn't reveal any secrets, but I would be interested in that?
No. Yes, well, I would share them with you if necessary, but right now, from the event itself, I didn't take anything away where I would say, wow, we need to introduce that in the Bundesliga tomorrow. I generally find, as we already had at the Euro, that when the national flags are spread out the whole ceremony before the game, I find that impressive as a stadium spectator, also as a TV viewer. Does that work at every Bundesliga game? No. I haven't seen any particularly clever sponsor presentations where I would say, wow, we have to do it exactly like that. I also found that it wasn't commercially excessive. Therefore, a lot in the hospitality product that I saw was all right. But it's not something where we in the Bundesliga have to fall behind or say we need to throw all our concepts overboard and rethink them tomorrow.
No, I think that we have never been as successful in the Bundesliga as we are today. So if you look at it all, the stadiums are full. It's all very impressive when you look at it over the last 20, 25 years. Now, you know that we are a digital university. If I ask you now, what skills do young people actually need who come to Sport 5? What do you actually expect, especially when you look at the digital aspect? How do you envision an ideal employee that you would like to hire? What should they be able to do in the digital field?
Yes, well, basically, it neither helps nor harms to have a certain enthusiasm for sports, because in the end, everything we do is always geared towards some kind of sports event. And I am, of course, glad, especially with younger colleagues, when they bring digital competence and I would say in today's social media, but also in collaboration with artificial intelligence, show a certain basic understanding. That's why I am, of course, glad when institutes like yours have understood the educational mission, which perhaps some state universities have not yet fully embraced, to prepare people so that they can transfer it into the working world. That would be it. Relatively briefly said from my side on that.
When you I see, regardless of your industry, I deal a lot with CEOs and so on who always say, yes, this digital transformation, we have to work a lot on it. Now, for you, since you also have to constantly be up to date with technical developments, where do you see the challenges for your company right now in this transformation? We talked earlier at the very beginning about AI, about all these things that are currently ultimately, yes, technically evolving. Where do you see the challenge for your company as a CEO now? In which direction you need to go?
Yes, well, I believe that technically speaking, we are, let's say, already at a very good level. The possibilities we have and offer to our colleagues, I believe, are, let's say, market appropriate. In our sports industry, I would say we are more of a pioneer. I believe the problem is adoption. So how do we really get all colleagues behind it, not seeing it as something to fear, but understanding it as an opportunity that makes their workday easier? I am someone who generally looks at the world positively. For me, the glass is always more half full than half empty, and I see this whole digital transformation as an opportunity to give colleagues more time to focus on their true core competencies and not on tedious little tasks, the manual work that needs to be eliminated. If someone had told me 10 years ago that we wouldn't have file folders in the office anymore, I probably would have laughed at them. And yet we all live well with it. And if I want something, I no longer have to go to some cabinet and pull out a thick lights folder. That seems totally trivial from today's perspective, especially for younger people. But we come from a world where there were entire archive walls with if I may stick with my lights folder example. And I think it's more about getting people on board, including older colleagues like me, and bringing them to a point where they don't close themselves off to this new world, but see it as an opportunity and also use the possibilities in their daily work.
Now, I'm glad we didn't talk about it 10 years ago, because then you would have called me crazy, because it was always my topic back then when I talked about it in lectures or at companies. I think this topic of lifelong learning, just a small closing question. What do you understand by lifelong learning? If you now you've already described it quite well for your company, how would you specify that?
Yes, well, maybe using myself as an example, I am by no means someone who sees every trend and also doesn't understand that it can become a trend, but I am capable of learning in that I can say I do not insist on what once was and what always worked well, but I am open, if it is explained to me, to engage with any other technology or development. I want to give you an example from a sports context. There are currently the so-called creator leagues. For me, that's indoor soccer. But when it was first introduced to me, I said, get away from me with this nonsense of amateurs playing with influencers, Twitter. But my colleagues who were responsible for business development were so persistent that I eventually said, okay, if you say this is it, then we'll go for it, and we'll really go for it. By now, it's a totally interesting area of activity for us. So what I want to say is I am not so conceited to say I know how it works. Sometimes people would probably wish for more openness from my colleagues, but I am already capable, am open to good arguments, and that applies both to business topics that offer potential as well as for digitalization or artificial intelligence that permanently influence our professional life.
Well, I can confidently encourage every student with an interest in sports to apply to you. I would do it if I were still 25, but it's too late now. However, I can at least stay in touch with you at the end. I have a little quiz, not any knowledge questions or anything like that. My employees, they really want me to go over this with you again. I'll ask you the questions in English. You only need to give one answer. So let's start with best World Cup host country out of the three in 2026: Mexico, United States, or Canada.
Canada.
Canada? Okay. Which Bayern Munich player, it will not surprise you that I ask this, player performed best at this World Cup? Harry Kane, Michael Olise, Dayot Upamecano, or Jamal Musiala?
I think Kane. I think he had the biggest impact for his national team.
Okay. Most valuable football club brand in the world right now: Manchester United, Real Madrid, Barcelona, or Bayern Munich?
I would love to say Borussia Dortmund, but
okay, we take it with us.
no, but they are doing a tremendous job in internationalization and brand building. I would say Real Madrid.
Okay, so I know that we will have lots of discussions about Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich. I love it. Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi.
Who wins the Ballon d'Or this year? Mbappé, Kane, Jamal, or Dembélé?
It depends a bit on the World Cup, I guess. If Argentina will make it again at the World Cup, I guess it might be Messi.
Okay, I will ask my colleagues why they didn't take Messi on the list. Okay, best young player in the world right now: Jamal, Musiala, Bellingham, sorry, and or Salibari.
I think Jamal is doing tremendously. Yes.
Most overrated football team at this World Cup: Brazil, Argentina, Portugal, or Spain?
Okay, you didn't mention Germany. That's good. Brazil.
Okay. Haaland or Mbappé? Bigger shirt sales this year?
Oh, I think Mbappé, but I love Haaland. He's brilliant. If you see what he makes to a small country like Norway, it's he's fantastic. If I would have a transfer for my favorite team, I would always try to get Haaland.
Yeah, I think after this World Cup it will be changed. But now, if you just look to the data, I think the impact of Real Madrid and Mbappé is high, and I think this is the reason that Mbappé is leading. Has Germany club ever won the Club World Cup?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it wasn't named Club World Cup, but it was the Weltpokal. And I think Bayern Munich won. I think
but also Dortmund.
Oh, really? Oh.
I think it's 97, if I'm right, or 96. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Last question: biggest football rivalry in the world: Real Madrid against Barcelona, Bayern Munich against Borussia Dortmund, Boca Juniors versus River Plate, or Manchester United versus Liverpool?
I would say Glasgow Rangers against Celtic, but you didn't mention them. If it's the clubs you mentioned, I think it's in Manchester, I would say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shiphorst. So now I've also tortured you a bit, but you see we have many football fans here. You can't look into this room now. Someone is standing opposite me in an Argentina jersey, a big Messi fan, and I now also call him Messi, even though he can't play football nearly as well, but that can be worked on. It has been a great pleasure to speak with you, but have I forgotten anything, or would you like to make any statement at the end where I perhaps did not ask you, or where you feel it is also important to you?
No, thank you. If I also have the chance to speak to your students, or if you consider it valuable, then please let me know. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for taking the initiative.
I will stay in touch with you, Mr. Shiphorst, and as you know, through my son's connection in Hamburg, I would like to maintain or establish contact. It is a great pleasure for me because I believe that your company is also valuable for our students and our university, and that we might need to calmly consider where we can find combinations. Then sports are important in society. Also, the commercialization, the discussion about commercialization is important, and I believe especially in football, and you are an expert where tradition and commercialization need to be brought together. That is a challenge. And I also have that we might have one last discussion point, then we have to stop, otherwise we will never finish. I was thinking, what would have actually happened if Germany had actually, let's say, made it to the semifinals? I think that would have been a boost for the country, which at the moment feels like everyone is a bit disappointed. And maybe it's good for the Bundesliga, perhaps as a last question, to say, okay, then I'll just look forward to the Bundesliga again, and then maybe it will bring more input there. How do you see that socially?
Has two components. I think socially it might have helped against the current discontent. I think it might have also helped us a bit in politics. We tend to problematize some things a bit more than other countries do. It would have helped with the athletic performance for the and the relevance for the Bundesliga. I'm always relatively clear on that. If Germany becomes world champion, that's obviously great for German football. Just as you described, if Germany is eliminated early, everyone is happy again. Wow, now there's finally Bundesliga again. I can't really see any negative impact. But for society, I believe, unfortunately, it is a missed opportunity that we did not advance further in the tournament.
So that was From Campus to Cyber with Hendrik Shiphorst from Sport 5. You noticed that the topic touched two people who are also emotionally close to football or sports. I hope there were some interesting topics and suggestions present. Should there be a need for discussion, feel free to get in touch via email at any time. Spot 5 is, I believe, easy to find online. If you want to contact Hendrik Shiphorst or his team, that will certainly be possible. Thank you for listening. All the best and see you soon. Stay sporty and healthy. Thank you, Mr. Shiphorst.
Thank you very much.